BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Sutherland, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. Everything you need to know about our version of the beautiful game. It is Thursday, the 15th of May, and relegation from the Premiership has been settled.
Whistle goes, Ronan Hale steps up, smashes it home, and it's 1-1. Dundee 1, Ross County 1. It's massive, this goal.
A 96th minute Ross County penalty ends St Johnstone's 16-year stay in the top flight. And issues were also resolved further up the table.
And I think it's Conor McMenamin who gets at the end of it and turns it into the net. They're now on top, St Mirren, and it's St Mirren 2, Hibs 2.
Hibs stuttered but got over the line to claim the coveted third spot. And Hibs ladies are in pole position in the SWPL title race.
You don't find yourself in these positions every season, so for us it's about making sure that the players now recover and get ready to go again on Sunday, because Sunday's massive.
They face Rangers in a winner-takes-all final match on Sunday.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Yes, welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast. Today we're joined by football writer Moira Gordon and the former Rangers and Aberdeen defender Maurice Ross. And Moira, I just want to start with a celebratory mention of Lewis Ferguson before we get underway with all the Premiership hoo-ha. A Coppa Italia winning captain for Bologna in a 1-0 victory against AC Milan. The icing on the cake in what has been an incredible Italian adventure.
It was fantastic. I think everybody celebrates seeing Scottish people doing well, especially abroad. And I think the idea of, seeing a young Scottish talent shining so brightly there, lifting a trophy, I think it's fantastic for the whole of Scottish football, but especially for Lewis and for his family. So yeah, absolutely brilliant achievement.
Maurice, in terms of what he's achieved there in Italy, and sometimes we find British players going abroad can struggle a little bit, but it's unbelievable what he's managed to achieve. Captain of Bologna, and the first time they've won this trophy in 51 years. In fact, it's just the third time Bologna have won the Coppa Italia. I mean, it's an historic achievement.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, he's coming off the back of last season being voted midfield of the year. Gets a career-threatening injury, comes back in time, and he's now won a trophy abroad, which no many people can say they have done. I think it's a fantastic achievement, and yeah, he deserves all the plaudits he's getting, and it'll be interesting to see what's next for him, because I think that he's done enough to warrant being mentioned with the bigger clubs abroad and in the UK.
Yep, great victory last night against AC Milan. Huge congratulations to Lewis. Now, let's talk about the Premiership. It was a huge, huge night. St Johnstone relegated after losing 2-1 to Hearts. And the goals they conceded were, I guess, symptomatic of their error-strewn defence all season. Let the great Simo Valakari debate begin, I suppose. Moira, it's been rumbling on for a while. He joined, and they were 10th in the table. They finished bottom of the table. Does he deserve to take charge of St Johnstone in the Championship for you?
I think it'll be interesting to see what they do decide, and I think he will be kept on. What I'm hearing at the moment is that he will be given the summer, but I think a lot of that will maybe depend on the fans' reaction. I think up to a couple of weeks ago, I think most fans would have preferred to keep him on. I think that's changed slightly. But I also think if you bring... I just feel we're getting crazy when it comes to managers. We're bringing people in for half a season, quarter of a season, chucking them out. They've not had time to bring in as many of their own players as they want. You say you want a change in style. That doesn't happen overnight. You've got to give people time to actually bring their own style of football in and be able to coach players that are there, or bring in new players that fit that style of play. So I think we're expecting things so quickly from managers, and I don't think it's realistic. So I think when you're going down, it's a chance for him to rebuild. My slight concern is that the Championship's a slightly different beast than the Premiership. So with so many players to change, and he has so many players out of contract at the end of this season, I think, 2/3, 3/4 of the squad. So it's going to be a massive rebuild, and it'll be depending on the sort of players that he brings in to cope with the Championship. And, as we all know, it's unrelenting, the Championship. It's not like you can have 1 or 2 weeks off, as we've seen sometimes in the Premiership this year. People have a slight lull for a little while and then pick up again with a good run. Championship is harsh. You're not really getting that many teams that go on, sustained runs. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they will keep him. But as I say, it'll be interesting to see whether he sees out a full season there, because I think the jury's still out on how he'll cope with the change of so many personnel and trying to impose his personal style in the Championship. But I mean, he's positive, he's bold, so why not?
Well, it's a great point about, the style. Obviously, it's been a big topic with Simo Valakari, and obviously, as you mentioned, the Championship can often be a battle. Maurice, what's your take on it? And I think interesting parallels with Jimmy Tillene a little bit, who we'll get onto later, in terms of just kind of trying to change the style, and there's going to be bumps in the road. But this is a huge bump in the road for St Johnstone. They're relegated. Simo Valakari's gotten a lot of plaudits for his style of football, but same question to you, really. Do you feel he's the right man to take St Johnstone into the Championship?
At the end of the day, players win your football matches. There's only so much you can do as a manager, as a coach, to a group of individuals. That always takes time. Now, if you're going to have knee-jerk reactions, and everybody will be full of emotion in Perth, but it's what's your strategy? What's your club's goals? Are you going to be a development club? Are you going to be a yo-yo club? Are you going to be a club that gives just Scottish people a chance? I don't know. What's the identity? But that needs to be made clear for me. However, what I would say in his defence is he has a clear identity in how he wants to play. Now, I've been to many games this year, and I don't see identity in many teams, to be honest. But I can see a clear identity there. Now, that takes courage, by the way. Now, if you're going to bring him from abroad into your football club, you've got to give him some form of respect and some form of platform to actually instill what he's about. Now, going into the Championship, you can argue the pitches are arguably a bit poorer, maybe AstroTurf in there, but you've got to give him that chance. I think it's only fair. He seems like a smashing fella, and arguably the football he plays is somewhat naive at times. But I enjoy when it clicks, and they're playing through the six, and the centre half stepping in and breaking lines. I enjoy it. Now, if you've not got players to go and win that game 1-0, the guy hits it past the post, you can't control that as a manager. But when I go to games, I look at, can I go home and can I see a pattern or an identity that I can say, if I was playing against his team, I could work against that. Some games I go in the SPL, I come home and go, what was that? I couldn't actually analyse that. So from that point of view, I think he's been quite good, and I think he deserves a chance.
We should talk about Hearts as well. They obviously got the win, and it's all about intrigue off the pitch, I suppose, Moira, really. Lawrence Shankland looks like a player reborn. Do you think that, given Derek McInnes is coming through the door at Tynecastle, that could convince Shankland that his future lies at Tynecastle?
I think only Lawrence can really answer that one. I think at the moment he's at a stage in his career where he's looking to, for some more financial security, I suppose, for his family long term, and obviously combine that with a football decision. So I think it'll depend. I think Derek coming in will be a help in terms of trying to keep him. I think it'll actually come down to what Hearts, how bold they are in terms of what contract they're offering, how much money, how much they can maybe fill the gap between what he wants and what they're wanting to pay for him at the moment. But I think also it'll depend on what other offers come in for him, to be perfectly honest. If he has more lucrative offers in a country or in a league that appeals to him, then I don't think it would matter really who Hearts were bringing in as manager. But I'm not sure there's that many of those offers on the table at the moment. So if I was Derek, the first thing I'd be doing when I got in there is trying to keep hold of him, because even this season, he's not had the goal scoring threat that he has in previous couple of seasons, but he's been magnificent in terms of bringing James Wilson through, in terms of linking up play, in terms of talking other players through. I think for the last 3 seasons, Hearts would have been in a far worse situation if they hadn't had Lawrence Shankland. And I think he papered over cracks for a couple of seasons. And this year, even when he's not been scoring, he's still been helping others round about him at times. And he just, he reads the game. He's an intelligent player. And I think he's an experienced one to keep in the dressing room as well. I think he will start scoring goals as long as you play a formation that suits him and give him that opportunity.
We must talk about Ross County. They do still have a chance of surviving in the Premiership after their 1-1 draw right at the death against Dundee. Excuse me. And it was hugely controversial, to say the least. It was Antonio Portales adjudged to have handballed in the penalty area, penalty for Ross County, earning them a 1-1 draw. Ronan Hale putting it away. Maurice Ross, we've already been discussing this off air. Your view on the penalty decision?
It's a shocker for me. Now, you can talk about guidelines, FIFA guidelines, what the rule is, what the criteria of handball is, but there's got to be a sense of there's got to be common sense in this. The minute you leave ground, your arms automatically come out. Now, you're facing forward. An object, the ball, hits you on your hand that you've just missed, hits your hand. It's a penalty. For me, it's not the referee's fault per se. I think it is the criteria that makes it a handball. When the rules were made in 1800s, it was to stop people actually trying to save the ball on the line. It wasn't for it brushing your thumb and you've got a nanosecond to evaluate where that ball's going. That for me is a flawed rule. And like we said before, I don't think it will ever be fixed. Because that seems to be the directive. This is where we're going. But any football man, fan, whoever, knows that's not a penalty. But Nick will also then say, well, that's the rules and I've done my job. So it's a hard one, to be honest. But I feel for everyone in Perthshire, St Johnstone, but you're relegated over a season of poor results rather than one incident, unfortunately.
Moira, it is the thorny handball rule once again, and it is subjective, as Maurice says, and I think you'd have to have a heart of stone not to feel sympathy for Dundee and Antonio Portales in those situations. But I suppose the counter-argument would be, if it had not been given from a Ross County point of view, Don Cowie would be raging as well, because so often you see when the body is made bigger, in whichever way, whichever context, referees seem to use that as the consistency level to get some kind of consistency when it comes to handball. And of course, managers are always asking for some kind of consistency. I just always come back to the Scotland thing. If this had been a match Scotland were playing against some other team and the other team had a handball incident like this, we'd all be screaming for a penalty, wouldn't we?
The thing is, though, with that argument you just put forward, how often do we say, oh, they'll not get away with that in Europe, domestically they'll get away with that? So we already acknowledge that we referee games slightly differently in different countries or, in different situations. And as Maurice says there, the referees will turn and say the rules are the rules. But if that's the case, why is every single push in the penalty box not a penalty when it is in the middle of the pitch? Why are defenders allowed to obstruct people getting to the ball to usher it out over the line? They allow that to go because it's common sense, it's part of the game, but they wouldn't allow that to happen in the middle of the pitch. So they already referee games differently away from the rules or apply the rules in different ways in different, situations already. So apply a bit of common sense in something like this. As Maurice says, you're jumping, you're also going backwards. I'd like to see a referee think that he's about to fall backwards and not raise an arm to try and steady himself or balance himself. I mean, it's not going to happen. It's human nature. You will put your hands out like that. He wasn't aware where the ball was. He wasn't gaining any kind of advantage from it. If it had hit it completely, it's going back towards his own goal. So, there's nothing to suggest that should have been a penalty, apart from if you're being an absolute stickler for the rules. And as I say, that's nonsense. It's a nonsense argument because they don't apply the rules like 100% in other situations. As I say, if it was every push in the penalty box or every time they ushered the ball out, they don't. So just apply a bit of common sense.
I suppose it is a flashpoint incident, and the bottom line is, as you kind of mentioned, Maurice, the referee probably would have been marked down if he hadn't given it.
Yeah, and that's where it goes back to. What's the directive? What's the criteria? And unfortunately, we're in an area where common sense does not prevail anymore.
Okay, so in terms of the actual football then, Dundee not quite safe. They really just need a point to avoid the playoff spot. They've actually got quite a good record, Moira, at St Johnstone recently, where they need to secure this point. How dramatic do you think it's going to be on Sunday? Obviously, Ross County are up against Motherwell, and they just simply need to go for the win. It's going to be a nerve-wracking day regardless what happens.
I mean, for all the fans and the players and managers involved, it's going to be a horrific day. But for fans and for neutrals and for the media, it's fantastic that it's set up this way. I mean, I still think Dundee are the best of the teams involved, so I still think they'll survive. But it will be a nerve-wracking day. And I think the thing with St Johnstone, a lot of times you would say a team's been relegated, the stuffing's been knocked out of them and they won't give anything, they'll kind of just going through the motions. But I think under Valkyrie, I think that's the interesting thing about him. He has those players playing like they're out for a training match almost every time. Even the last few games, they've not looked like they're under real pressure or panicked or restricted in the way they play. So I think they'll go out and play, the way they've been playing. So I think that will mean that obviously there'll be attacking threat from them. Hopefully for Dundee's point of view, there'll also be a few openings at the back again. But as I say, I still think Dundee will save themselves, but they won't like the idea that it's gone to the final day.
Indeed. I just want to quickly mention Lennon Miller before we kind of get onto the top six, Maurice. He got a standing ovation as he came off the pitch as Motherwell comfortably beat 10-man Kilmarnock. I mean, it's kind of looking inevitable that, he will leave Motherwell in the summer. And they'll be hoping for a bidding war. What would be the minimum valuation you'd put on somebody like Lennon Miller if he was to leave Fir Park?
It's not what the young lad is valued at. It's what Motherwell will accept. Motherwell are not flush with cash. So, for instance, if you're looking at Davy Turnbull going for $3 million, no, I don't see them getting that kind of money.
You don't?
No. I think I look at this. I'm a stats guy. I look at stats. I'm looking at assists. I'm looking at goals. I don't see enough of both for it to be a massive number. I think he's a young talent. Yes, that's undoubtable.
Huge potential, of course. Yeah,
huge potential. And are you going to spend north of £3 million for him? Maybe. Because obviously there's going to be a big jump in to the club he's going to if they can afford that kind of money. I think if a club comes in and pays $3 million, I'll go, brilliant, great. Motherwell have brought another player through, fantastic. The club that keeps the wolves away from the door for another couple of years, brilliant. And the guy gets a life-changing amount of money. I think if somebody comes into Motherwell and offers £1.5 are Motherwell brave enough to knock back £1.5 million for a young player that's probably only on less than £1,000 a week? I don't know. It's a tough one.
Moira, your thoughts?
Yeah, the thing with Lennon Miller, I don't think he's a player that's banging down the door to get away. So again, that means that comes into the judgment when it comes to how much Motherwell want or expect, or what they're willing to take. I don't think they'll sell him necessarily for $1 million, but I agree. I don't think it's probably going to get up to $3-4 million because I still think it's potential. And I think clubs coming in know that Motherwell won't necessarily, if they were playing poker, they're not going to sit there and bluff and take, in their time waiting for a 10 million or a 5 million. I don't think they're going to do that. So it's all about, if you were going to Man U and trying to get a player from them, they'll demand extra money, they're bigger money, it's about your selling club, your status, how much you can afford to turn down.
A big talent. Yeah, it'd be fascinating to see what happens during the summer. Let's talk about the race for Europe now. Hibs claiming third place, although they threw away a 2-goal lead and St Mirren had a goal chalked off. Huge achievement, Moira, for David Gray, given everything that has happened this season and the sensational turnaround. They'll have to knight him again at Easter Road, won't they?
It's funny because I think there's a lot of the fans that were taking that knighthood off him round about November time when they were sitting at the bottom of the league, and suddenly he's flavouring the month again and he can have that knighthood back. So I think it's been a phenomenal achievement, and I think it goes to what I was saying earlier about we're so quick to dispense with managers when things start poorly. Give them a bit of time to figure things out, to find out what suits with the players they've got, get the best out of those players, coach a few things, and then see whether there's an upturn at that point. I think Hibs have done that. Now, they haven't in the past. They've been knee-jerk, and I think this time they almost were forced to try and be a bit more patient, but they were patient, and they've got the rewards for that. And I think Dave Gray deserves a huge amount of respect as a new manager coming in, the amount of pressure that was on him, and he still figured out a way to make it work and turn it around and to take them into Europe Jack Ross did that back in 2021, and I think that was the first time in about 16 years they got third place at that point. So for a new manager to come in and have all the turmoil he had at the beginning of the season and deliver that again, I think is a huge credit to him.
And Maurice, it almost guarantees European group stage football for Hibs, unless Aberdeen win the Scottish Cup against Celtic. But given what we saw last night, as Celtic swept Aberdeen aside 5-1, I'm not sure many people are expecting that to happen. I noticed Chris Boyd on Sky Sports last night describing the Aberdeen display as spineless. Is that fair or too harsh?
I can understand why he said it. Yeah. Well, do you know what? When you can beat Celtic, can be on fire, right, and pick you off, and they're just too good. It's then how you go about your business against a Celtic team that was just basically playing training ground football, and it's still 5-1. Was there anybody getting a wee bit naughty? Was there anybody really? Did they accept it? Did they think, we'll just turn up the cup final, it'll be fine? I don't know. I don't see Aberdeen laying a glove on Celtic yet. Celtic are in that groove where they're turning up. It's going to be party atmosphere, and the fans it'll be sunny. Scottish Cup final day is always sunny. Celtic are just cruising at the moment, and I don't see anything other than the Celtic win. Sorry to say to Aberdeen fans, but I just don't see it.
Great for Celtic fans last night, Moira's. Plenty of fringe players got in on the act, but I guess for fans of clubs who aren't Rangers or Celtic, slightly dispiriting that they can do this to one of the clubs that you might look at as disruptors to the big two from time to time. But when you look at the fact that Aberdeen have shipped 19 goals in their last 5 games against Celtic, it does not bode well for Jimmy Tillene's side when it comes to the Scottish Cup final, and I'm probably slightly understating that.
Exactly, and as Maurice said, they're in that groove now. They're just basically seeing themselves over the line. There's a treble there. You don't want to be facing a team that have got something even more than just the silverware to play for. So they've got that next bit of history in terms of their treble. I don't see how they can stop them. And the worrying thing is, I don't think Aberdeen can see how they can stop them. They don't seem to have. It's not like they're coming into every game with a slightly different approach or, identifying like one key area that they can try and improve. They just don't have any answers. They don't have any solutions to anything that Celtic are throwing at them. And they're not the only team. I mean, there's a lot of teams when Celtic are in full flow, can't stop them or try. But it just seems such a gulf. I just don't see how they can bridge that at the cup final day when there's even more at stake and even more on the line than there was last night.
And also, Jonathan, this disruptive tag. Who's mentioned this? The disruptors.
Well, exactly. I mean,
the Aberdeen have not beat
nobody,
Celtic
frankly, in the last 40 years since the duopoly has dominated Scottish football. But I guess that's always the hope from your Hearts fans, your Hibs fans, your Aberdeen fans, maybe even your Dundee United fans.
Yeah, but there's got to be some logic. There's got to be some stats.
Well, the financial chasm's massive, obviously, Maurice.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that does come into it, and absolutely. But let's not talk about it then. You know what I mean? Disruptors. How can you disrupt? You're 30 points behind. You know, how can you disrupt it? So for me, it's more about hope, and they win a few games at the start of the season, and it's hunky dory. But the fact are, Aberdeen have not beaten Celtic in 30 attempts. It's a long time to then think, oh, we're going to disrupt because we won 5 pre-season matches. So it's. I think there needs to be a bit of a reality check. There's nobody coming close to Rangers and Celtic again because of the financial chasm, and I think Aberdeen getting to the cup final is in somewhat a success for Aberdeen. And when you come up against a team like Celtic with the riches they have and how far ahead they are at the moment, then it's going to be some wee 8-year-old's first Scottish Cup final, and he's going to remember it for the rest of his days, and it's going to be a lovely day for all the families up there. But unfortunately, it will be heartache for Aberdeen.
I've got to ask about St Mirren as well, Maurice. They're only a point behind Dundee United, but they have to go to Celtic when they get presented with the trophy this weekend. So I'm not sure anything can happen in football, but do St Mirren have enough in the tank to usurp Dundee United? Do you feel they're obviously up against the Dons this weekend?
Yeah, if you look at how the results that Stevie Robinson has got with St Mirren, you wouldn't put it past them, considering Celtic are already on holiday mode, right? It wouldn't surprise me. Do I think they will manage it? If I was a betting man, I would say probably not, because there's going to be carnival atmosphere, and you know what it's like at Celtic Park, carnival atmosphere. It's pretty intimidating. However, the fact that St Mirren are in a position to go ahead of Dundee United, considering, again, we're going to talk about budgets, you know, I think it's a fantastic season for Stevie Robinson and St Mirren. But I think that'll probably, the table will stay as it is after the final day of the season.
Okay, finally, let's check in with the SWPL, where the title will go all the way to the final day after wins for the various sides topping the table. Hibs retain a 3-point advantage after beating Celtic 4-2 with a final day decider on Sunday against second-placed Rangers at Ibrox. Rangers beat Hearts 5-3 to keep their hopes alive. They've scored a staggering 139 goals this season. Huge drama. Goal difference basically ruling out Glasgow City picking up the title. In any other season, they probably have done enough to win. I mean, Moira, it does suggest that there is an increasing strength in the league, which is good to see.
I think there's still a huge gulf in terms of, we look at the beginning of the season, and the fact that, you know, Rangers have racked up 139 goals tells you there's a gulf, because they were winning games 10-0, 8-0, 11-0 at different points early part of the season. But what the title run-in shows us is that in the top half of the table, the top number of teams, it's very, very close. I mean, the last few, I think this is the third season in a row where it's going to the last day of the season for the title presentation. You can't ask for much more than that. And to have 4 teams pretty much up until, the last couple of weeks vying for that title, that's a competitive league anywhere in the world in terms of having 4 people competing for it in the final month of the season or final few weeks. So you take that, the quality is improving at the top, the competitiveness is improving at the top, and the drama's there, as we've seen the last few years. But I still think there's a gulf between the top teams and the bottom teams in that Premier League.
Maurice, it's the drama. It's the drama that builds it. It builds the story, doesn't it? It builds the sport. It makes it interesting. It brings people to it. And the competition, well, it brings the best out of other teams. And slowly over time, it will strengthen, won't it?
Yeah, for sure. So the more fans you get, the more economy comes. Again, it's an economic thing. It's absolutely economy drives sport. It's as simple as that. So, but it is fantastic. Joe Potter and Grant Scott. I know Grant. He was on my A licence, smashing guy. He's done a great job there at Hibs. Hibs need to go to Rangers and win on the last day of the season. It'll be a fascinating game. But considering Rangers' firepower, I think it'll be a nail biter.
It's quite interesting though, because you look at the cup final between them, and it was very one-sided in favour of Rangers. But Rangers have only lost, I think, 4 games this season, and 2 of them were to Hibs. So, Hibs know how to beat them still. But Rangers, as you say, with that firepower, can be dangerous, as they proved in the cup final. So it's going to be, I think it's a really intriguing game. I don't think it's one that you would say there's a cast iron favourite for it.
A brilliant weekend in prospect. Moira, Maurice, thank you very much indeed. Remember, new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast every day. Make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Scottish football, the gift that keeps on giving. Thanks for listening.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.